Welcome to Lesson 3 of Sunflower Studies. Today's lesson is on cognitive distortions. Last week we learned about the importance of positive words to ourselves. Today we will talk about the importance of positive thoughts. This is one of the most difficult lessons for me. Part of that is because many of the cognitive distortions are very similar, and it's kind of hard to identify exactly which one it is. But that's not important to name the correct one. The importance is to recognize that what you're thinking is a cognitive distortion. The bigger reason for me to have trouble with this lesson is because this is something I really, really struggle with. There have been a lot of times as I've prepared to teach this course that I have wondered if I have any right to teach it when I still have so many issues myself. I've even had some comments recently about that. If you know me well, you know that I have actually made some improvements. And the main reason I wanted to teach this course was to share some of the things that have helped me. So yeah, I'm not perfect, and I still have a lot of work to do, especially on cognitive distortions. But none of us are perfect. For example, that was incorrect grammar. Not perfect. Right, cognitive distortions is also called stinkin' thinkin'. It's a term that was first brought up in the 70s and 80s, and it refers to the irrational thoughts and beliefs that we have unknowingly reinforced. There are negative self-thoughts. Cognitive distortions are the lies your brain tells you in the context of thoughts and beliefs. We all have them, but sometimes they can become overwhelming. By identifying our incorrect thinking patterns, our cognitive distortions, we are better able to respond to them and improve our thoughts. Learning about cognitive distortions can help us to overcome them. There are several types of cognitive distortions. The number and names vary by source. Some of them are very similar. The important part is recognizing that the thinking is not accurate. If you would like, you can look this up online. There are a lot of cute little therapy handouts about cognitive distortions that maybe you'll find more helpful in addition to this lesson. The next several slides, we're going to go through some of the main cognitive distortions and examples. All or nothing thinking. This is also called polarized thinking or black and white thinking. This cognitive distortion is where you see things in only black and white or absolutes. The words always and never are frequently part of this. An example is seeing a single event as representing an endless pattern. You may see things as extremes, either great or terrible, but usually terrible. You consider yourself a failure if you're not perfect. Here are some examples of all or nothing thinking. I always fail. Since I'm not working as a teacher, my college education is pointless. Some of these examples are mine. My entire diet is ruined because I gave in and ate candy. Everyone thinks I'm annoying. The next cognitive distortion is called emotional reasoning. It is also called jumping to conclusions or mind reading. This is where we let our emotions control our interpretation of things. What we feel must be true. If we feel like we are alone, we must not have any friends. This also includes assuming others' motivations. You assume that you know what someone else is thinking. You listen to your emotions instead of listening to logic. Some examples: she hasn't texted me today. She must be mad at me for something. That guy just looked at me and then looked away because he thinks I'm ugly. You feel lonely, so you must be unlovable. You feel overwhelmed, so your problems must be impossible to solve. Fortune telling. In this cognitive distortion, you think you can predict the future, and you are convinced that bad things will happen. This may cause you to avoid trying things because you feel like something bad will result from it. You predict negative outcomes for everything. Some examples: I'm never going to get a good job. She's just going to decide she hates me. If I haven't gotten married by now, I never will. We're never going to find what we're looking for at the store. I can work as hard as I can and never get a promotion. Next is labeling. This is where you label yourself or others with negative terms stated as fact. Perhaps you apply one characteristic of a person to the person's whole nature, or you define someone by a single event. I'm such a fatso. She's just an old biddy. That store clerk is such a jerk. I missed that easy trivia question. I'm so stupid. Magnification and minimization. Magnification is also called catastrophizing. It is blowing things out of proportion in your mind. For example, he's going to realize I'm boring and will leave me. Minimization is denying something is a problem when it is, or minimizing positives. The example of denying something is a problem is, it's okay. My brakes are worn down, but my car will be fine. Minimizing positives, my work isn't really that good. Here's some more examples. I'm a terrible mother. I'm not really that good. I was just lucky that time. People say I write well, but I'm really not a good writer. She's so perfect. Mental filter. With a mental filter, you dwell on a single negative event. You may focus on one negative thing someone said and ignore all the good things the person has said. You magnify the negative and filter out the positive. Examples. I got 98% on that assignment, but one person had some negative feedback about my presentation. The presentation just wasn't good enough. I got all 5s on my work evaluation except one. Just not good enough. Overgeneralization. Overgeneralization is generalizing from a specific, such as seeing one mistake as making you a failure, or seeing a single event as an endless pattern. I burned the chicken. I'm a terrible cook. I didn't get that job I interviewed for next week. I'm never going to get a job. I tried to play the piano in church when I was 14 and messed up. I can't play the piano well enough to play publicly. Next is personalization. This cognitive distortion involves self-consciously interpreting that things are about you. You blame yourself for things that are not your fault, or at least not entirely your fault. You see yourself as personally responsible for bad things that are not in your control. My little sister just got in trouble. If I had been a better example, that would not have happened. She didn't get that job because I didn't pray hard enough. It's my fault that she's not doing well at work. I didn't do a good job training her. Next is playing the comparison game. We often fall into the trap of comparing ourselves to others. We think we need to keep up with other people. Social media can contribute to this cognitive distortion. You unfairly compare yourself without taking other factors into account. You compare your worst to someone's best, or your start to someone else's middle. She's so thin, why can't I lose weight? He is so much better at math than I am. All my friends were married a long time ago. The last one is should statements. This cognitive distortion is judging how people, either yourself or others, should, ought, or must be or do. You set unfair demands on yourself. Some examples: I should be married by now. He shouldn't mow the lawn without a shirt on. I should be thinner. I should read more. So, what do you do about cognitive distortions? How do you get the stinkin' out of your thinking? First, analyze the thought. Is it true? It probably isn't. If it's not easy to tell if the thought is false, put the thought on trial. When you have a negative thought, write it down. Then write down any evidence in support of and any evidence against that thought. There's a handout for this on the course website. Now, when you're doing this, you have to use real evidence, not your imaginary evidence. For example, if you think you are stupid, evidence in support of that, maybe you say, I haven't read this specific book, or I didn't go to college, when really neither of those is a definition of smart. So be careful not to make your own evidence that is more cognitive distortions. When you recognize one of these negative thoughts in your mind, acknowledge it, name it, and reframe it or move on. For example, you catch yourself calling yourself a fatty. You acknowledge the thought and name it. That was labeling. Then you either move on or you think of a better thing to say to yourself. The important thing is to not give the thought more attention than it deserves. One way to handle a cognitive distortion is to replace the negative statement with 3 positives, one not related at all. This is like one of the examples we had for writing affirmations. So when you call yourself a fatty, you stop yourself, recognizing that you're labeling, then come up with 3 things to say that are better. I have worked hard to change my diet. I went on a hike yesterday. I am incredibly smart. Your mind is like a highway. You can't control what cars drive on your highway, but you can decide which cars park in the parking lot and which have to keep driving on. Send the negative thought cars on their way and let the positive thought cars stay a while. Your challenge for this week is to pay attention to your thoughts. Identify your cognitive distortions and take note of them. Send me an example of a cognitive distortion that you notice. You don't have to name it like this is a should statement. If you can, that's great. But really, the important part is recognizing that your thoughts are cognitive distortions. They're not reality. It's important to identify our negative thoughts that are cognitive distortions so that we can learn to overcome them. The website has several handouts. One is the Thoughts on Trial handout. One is kind of a little test or worksheet about cognitive distortions, and then the course handout for this class session. Please be sure to check those out. Check out the additional resources on the website as well. There is an interesting one for cognitive distortions that's included in the additional resources section. Have a great week. See you next time.